Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Berlin, Germany, where we are watching the FIDE Grand Prix, the last leg, and it's the group stage. We've got a couple of rounds to go where everybody plays everybody before qualifying to the semi-final to earn the eligible points to ultimately make it to the candidates. And today we are covering pretty wild developments. I didn't make a recap yesterday. I was extremely busy. I do apologize, even though you told me to stop apologizing for nothing. Today we had a lot of plot twists, a lot of really interesting games. So let's just jump right into it with this matchup. It's do or die for one Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura. He absolutely has to win this game. Right now, Levon is the group leader, and he defeated Hikaru. So if Levon somehow wins this game with black, he has the absolute dominant tiebreak, and Hikaru's chances are almost gone. No, they are gone. Hikaru has to make the comeback right now. The way he chooses to go about that is to play into a Ruy Lopez. Levon doesn't play a6 and then knight f6, which is the traditional main line. Levon actually plays the Berlin. So Levon's like, I'm the group leader. I can make a draw with black. I already beat you with the white pieces in the first round of the group. Hikaru plays an anti-Berlin. So if you want a game of chess, you push this pawn to d3, you defend e4, black plays bishop c5, and now rather than playing the move bishop takes c6, which is played here all of the time, Hikaru plays c3. That move prevents anything from coming to d4, obviously. Also long-term prospects of pushing this pawn. Bishop a4, bishop c2. And Levon here gets real aggressive. He puts two pawns in the center, and now all hell breaks loose. So his queen's out and about. Hikaru slides back to c4, getting out of the way of this discovered check that could have existed with bishop f2 hitting here. Queen back to d6. Both sides castle a couple of moves later after Hikaru makes a little expansion and black plays bishop f5. So Levon basically brought his queen out and voluntarily slid it back because he has very active play. His queen and bishop, his queen and bishop line up on this pawn. His bishop here is very powerful. He can sometimes throw in an e4. His knights can jump into the middle once the white pieces obviously start moving forward. But Hikaru has a very solid position and has many pluses of his own. First of all, queenside space that he's pushing directly into these pieces. And behind the queenside space, the other pieces are going to come. So the bishop is going to come, right? The knight is going to maybe go to b3. The knight is maybe going to go to c4. And black can't take this. The whole thing that he's staring at, he can't take, because what happens when all of this settles? a5 and the bishop is trapped. Right, so that's the entire idea here behind this. And if black plays a5, it's not over. b5 kicks the knight out, and you have bishop a3 opportunities. The queen can go to a2, lining up this way. You have knight b3 if you'd like it, knight c4 in the future once the bishop moves. This is coming. Hikaru's got a very nice position. Obviously, something's working out. Knight g6, Levon rotates, meets the bishop there. Hikaru trades it off, and now plays the move d4. The initiative feels like it's really not stopping. I mean, it's 17 moves in a row. White is expanding. Everything is coordinated. Levon here is a little bit on the defensive side. Comes back to d6, takes on d4, and plays knight d5 and says, all right, chill out. All right, stop it. Just calm down. We could talk this out. Everything is fine. Hikaru's like, no, I'm good. Bishop takes d5. Let's keep it moving. Let's keep going forward. Bishop takes d5. Nope. We're not slowing down. I don't even care if we trade queens. Knight c4. It now seems like 22 moves that black is suffering under white's initiative. And it's crazy because actually black was the one that played the very aggressive move d5. But Hikaru, after consolidating his position, has been only posing problems to Levon. Literally every move. a4 threatens to trap the bishop. This attacks the knight. This threatens to potentially play bishop to a3 and block this, cut black off on the diagonal. This does actually attack the queen. This does attack the queen, right? This move attacks the pawn. Here we have a brief moment of pause, but maybe white is going to go knight e5 and continue butchering. So every move, it seems like. And Levon goes bishop g4. He chooses not to play b6 because even though this solves one problem, it immediately creates a second one. So bishop g4, giving the pawn to Hikaru in order to damage his pawn structure. And Levon says, Hikaru, this is fine. I'm going to defend this position down a pawn, right? Because in the long run, white's structure is very bad. And black will maybe activate the rooks, knight h4, maybe even get some counterplay on the pawns. So we have h6, the rook goes to c1 because this c7 pawn looking real nice in the long run, and Hikaru doubles the rooks potentially and also defends both pawns at the same time. He gets checked, king goes to f1. You guys might ask, why is he not hiding his king in the corner? It's an endgame. So actually bringing the king to f1 and potentially in the future, the white king will be able to get active. It's actually a little bit better. If the knight goes to f4, there's even checkmate threats. So suffocating your king in the corner is not always good. Sometimes it's good when you have to hide from like a queen or something, but king f1 is better in this case. Rook h5, and Hikaru's like, I can protect my h-pawn, but I think I gotta go for it. So he plays knight e7. Knight e7 is a very clutch move. If black just takes on h2 here, which is exactly what Levon does, there's a very nice move here by white. This move to the untrained eye almost makes no sense. Like, honestly, almost makes no sense. The move is rook e4. Rook e4 is a beautiful move. Because the fact that you go knight e7, you would think that, oh, well, obviously I'm going to take, then I'm going to take. If you take the knight, you activate black's rook. All right, you've only helped one person. The real point of going knight e7 is if you get taken, you have a one-way ticket to the 7th rank. 7th and 2nd rank in endgames is everything. So if both rooks get down here, you just bulldoze everything. You win all the pawns. The knight on e7 is there so it can be taken, and rook e4 cuts off the black knight's mobility. If it goes to h4, that's fine. King e2. I just guard this. That's completely fine. So now he checks him. Now the king goes to g2, so the rook can go away. And now and only now does Hikaru take, because he can take on c7, rook a4, but d5. And I'm threatening to undouble my pawns. If you give me two connected passers walking down the end of the board, I win the game on the spot. I just push both pawns. So Levon plays rook a8. Here comes rook e7. Rook's on the 7th rank. All right, now Levon can play extremely passively, but that's really depressing. So instead, he tries to kick out a window and jump out of the balcony by going king h6. Hikaru takes on g7. The king's trying to go out the balcony, but check and d7. Now that pawn is a square away from promotion. Rook c8 wins the game for white. Cuts off that rook, protected by the pawn. So black has to play rook d5. How is Hikaru going to win this? By trying to get the king closer to him. He plays f4 because if you take rook c8, and it's like, well, why couldn't he do that last time? Because there's rook takes d7, right? Rook c4 check. And now I'm going to take the rook. So if you just go back a couple moves, this is actually really, really instructive. If you try to play rook c8, rook d7 in this position, there's two hanging rooks. You have to choose which one you take. One of them is going to die. But if after f4 you do that, then you can drop back and check the king. You can't do that in the game because the rook would go to c5, a covered square. So once again, f4 check is very important. Levon tries to hide, but now rook g7. Hikaru's like, in the long run, I'm going to win all your pawns, Levon. And that's what he starts doing. He plays rook c8. He gets defended here, but now the pawns will fall. At some point, white will take on b6, and he's two clean pawns up. The pawn is running, and the worst part for black is his king is in no man's land. If his king was behind the pawn, if his king was back here, but the problem is his king is out in the open. Hikaru gives a check. Hikaru comes back to f3, and he is going to put his rook directly behind that b pawn and win the game. You say, why didn't, and Levon resigned. He resigned because rook b7, rook b3, the game is over. If the rook moves, the pawn pushes. If the king gets closer, I go here, you go here, I go here, I win your h-pawn, and this is a winning king and pawn endgame because my king and pawn just walk together. So Levon chooses not to do anything like that. Rook f3, rook b3, and Hikaru wins the game. This is an incredibly clutch win. I cannot stress this enough. This is so clutch. However, while we are all staring at Hikaru and Levon and who is going to win the section, because they're both tied now, 2 out of 4, there's two guys over here who are also trying to win the section. Aparin and Yesipenko, and we have a Nimso Indian. We have e3, a main line, d5 takes, and now white, rather than putting his knight on f3, puts his knight, plays queen c2 and puts his knight on e2. And you would think, well, what is the point here? Well, in the future, white might play f3, e4, like they do in the Queen's Gambit Declined. Yesipenko, however, decides not to allow any of that. f3, e4 doesn't make any sense anymore because d4 is under fire. So after c5, we have takes, and now these knights are going to either go to d4 or f4. So let's see what happens. Knight b5. The knight is going to maybe make it to d4, right? That's potentially if it gets booted. But we have knight f4. And let's not forget, black is playing with an isolated pawn, so controlling the square in front of it is very important for white, even if it means knight for bishop. Knight for bishop doesn't always matter in isolated pawn positions because that pawn is going to get weaker and weaker the more pieces that black trades. So a6, and exactly that happens. Here comes knight e4, and he even gives up his other bishop. You would think this is completely nuts. Why would anybody give up 2 bishops for 2 knights in an open board like this? Because the more pieces you trade, the weaker that isolated pawn gets. And it's really good at being supported by knights. So bishop g4, and Yesipenko again trades a piece. I mean, Yesipenko has to be really sure that trading both knights and the bishop means that in the long run, his bishop is better than white's knight to the extent that the isolated pawn doesn't matter. And now we begin a battle for the d-file. Look at this. I'm telling you, this pawn will determine the fate of this game. Does Apayan win? Does Yesipenko hold? Black can't win this game. I just hope you understand. Only white is playing this position for a win. And look at this. Look at this. Look at this machine gun that he has on the d-file. This is incredible. Alyoshin's gun, right? The tripling up, the 2 rooks and the queen and the knight. It's now time for Yesipenko to play d4, right? He has to. You give back the pawn to your opponent. He takes it. And now we have a5, d5, and we're just going to act like nothing's happening. A perfect battle for an isolated pawn, right? And now that pawn is going to move forward. d6, suffocating the black position. A takes b4. You might ask, why did he not just take on a3 here? Then knight c5, attacking both the queen and the rook, and that just wins. So a b4, and it looks like Yesipenko is going to get the pawn back here. But I wouldn't be so confident, because after this, we have knight takes b7, which I believe the computer even claims that white can go back to d3, which is just absurd. But knight takes b7, and essentially Apayan has cashed in or cashed out his isolated pawn to win a pawn on the queen side, and that's it. I mean, he is going to try to get this knight back to c5 to safety, all the way back to his position if he can, and try to win. Takes. You cannot take because of back rank checkmate, so h6. And now, Apayan just has to find a way through. He safeguards his king. How's he going to do this? Protecting his king from checks. Look at that. Look at how he regroups the rook and the queen. He's like, the rook is better there, the queen is better there. He's not like moving furniture in his living room. He's got to start pushing. He's got to start pushing at some point. There it is. And he's getting closer and closer. h4 now to take away any more squares from the king. Also lock in that. h5 is a massive commitment. And now queen back to e3. I think rook d7 here won on the spot. To rook d7, queen f5 check, but queen e3, queen f3, and Yesipenko resigns. He resigns because, again, just like in the last game, if you trade the queens, this pawn, rook has to be behind it, right? That's just really bad. And if you don't trade the queens, you play like queen c2 or something to try to make sure the pawn can't go forward. Rook d7, my pawn takes, and I make a queen. So, folks, Hikaru wins and ties Levon, but Apayan, with 2 rounds to go, leads Group A. He has 2.5 out of 4. What? The sneaky man, the lowest rated player in the group, 2.5 out of 4. He's got to play Hikaru with the black pieces, and then he's got Levon with white. So they're gonna try to get him out of there real quick because their business is settled. Hikaru and Levon are 1-1. So anything can happen in Group A. We move to Group B. Here we have a complex battle between, and by the way, not a Berlin, bishop c4, it's in Italian, a complex battle between Dominguez Perez and Dubov. This one got weird real quick as Dominguez shoved his knight into the middle. Dubov immediately got rid of it and seemed to be on his way to winning the d5 pawn. But then d4 came. And if you play e4 here and try to win this, I'm going to go knight d2 and immediately be able to take on e4 once you move. So we had knight d5, a capture on e5, and a very interesting position where it seems like due to the pawn structure, white should just be calmly better because he has the bishop pair. But rook e1, queen c7, and yeah, Dubov just got real active. I mean, his knights are very nice in the middle of the board. His queen and bishop are on a nice diagonal, and he got his knight in. I mean, he's just very, very active. So here, Lenier decided to trade the light-squared bishop away to give black the isolated pawn, right, situation. We just saw how masterfully you can play against it. The problem is here, it's not so easy. You're creating a blockade just like Apayan did, but Apayan had a piece imbalance. He had a knight for a bishop. These guys have the same pieces, and the problem is black is really active. So Dubov is all up in his face, right? Knight g5. This knight is coming to the light squares potentially to attack the king. The knight is also guarded. It can always go back. It's still fighting for that square. So it's not easy, right? Bishop c5. And that isolated pawn at some point is going to either move forward or get traded. The players here threaten us with a repetition of moves, and Dubov's like, no, let's play on. This king is still safeguarded, though, and after knight c5, Dubov takes over the initiative because a4 is a target, the knight is coming to e4. That isolated pawn now, in this knight versus bishop situation, the knight and bishop are on different sides. Apayan had the knight versus the bishop, but here, Dominguez has the bishop for the knight, and yeah, Dubov has a really active and dynamic position using that isolated pawn. I mean, look at this. I mean, this is just dancing around his position with his horse. A lot happened in this game, and we got to an endgame of knight versus bishop. If anybody's better here, actually, it's white, shockingly. because after this, if you count pawns, it's equal, but apparently white can, computer thinks that white can somehow create some problems for black. I wouldn't be so sure, even though Dominguez does his best to kind of push everybody as far as possible. It's really difficult. The black king and then can hang out anywhere. He can hang out here, meet this pawn majority as it moves forward, and like it's a fortress. I mean, you can play b5 at some point, for example. If you play b5 here, cb5, king d5, but then I come here. So we play 62 moves of chess in this game, and the players end up making a draw. A hard-fought game, an interesting game, but a game where the isolated pawn did not prove to be decisive for the side that that was trying to attack it. The other game in Group B, yesterday, I think Keimer had his highest win of his life when he defeated Lenier Dominguez. I do apologize, I haven't covered that game. I didn't want to include it in today's recap because maybe I should have, but I already have 8 games to look at. But Keimer won a very nice game, and today he is looking to defend a 4 knights English with the move g3 against Mamidyarov. Group B has had a lot of decisive results back and forth. Bishop b4, and we get a very trendy mainline position where black shoves this e-pawn forward, and yeah, I mean, just basically kicks this knight out and is like, what are you going to do? I'm threatening to play g5. Look, literally, I'm threatening to trap your knight on move 9. Now, Mamidyarov saw that. He played d4. That covers that. h6 threatens it again. f3 is looking to get out. g5. You say, f3 is looking to get out. What the hell are you talking about? How is f3 looking to get out? By not. He wants to sack it. And basically argue that this pawn wall and all the open lines that you've now granted to white are better than having a full piece. Bishop takes h6. Knight g4, queen d2, and yeah, this is apparently the preparation of Mamidyarov. I think after bishop takes h6, the best line according to the computer is to play h3, just leaving this here because obviously this is hanging, and then sacrificing the rook. And the best line for white is not to even take it because this bishop is apparently better than this rook. I don't understand chess, but that's okay. Nothing surprising. Queen d2 takes h3. Please leave. No, thank you. If you take me, it's checkmate. For a second time in a row, Mamidyarov doesn't blunder a very trivial tactic and instead plays the move bishop takes f8. Now, what the heck is the material count? Equal. It's actually equal. Black has 2 knights and white has a rook and a pawn. So 6-6. However, one man is attacking the other, and this man is attacking the other in a very brutal fashion. He's not doing it in a very nice way. And he plays c5, and then here he decides, let's trade queens, and let's play this endgame. I think that my pawns, my 6 pawns versus your 4 are better in the long run with the rooks. I always like to say 2 pieces are better than a rook, but 2 pieces are not better than a rook and 2 pawns, and 2 pieces are definitely not better than a rook and 2 pawns when they're both knights. They're both very passive because of the active nature of the opponent's pawns. Yeah, you get what I'm saying, right? So white just has really powerful pieces. So how is he going to do it? He's going to activate his rooks and swarm black. The king is kicked out, and this is going to be a combination of harassing the opponent and coordinating your rooks in a way that you can finally advance your pawns or destroy the weaknesses, right? So destroy the weaknesses. So at some point, there it is. He's got to push his pawns, and there they go. I mean, black is defending very well. To Keimer's credit, he's defending as well as he can, but this is not a game that he's going to be playing for a win. He tries to trade rooks, thinking that white with the 1 rook is going to be less powerful than with 2 rooks, because 2 rooks coordinate very well together. 1 rook on its own, maybe not so much. But Mamidyarov just very calmly. I mean, at this level, they're very good at simplifying into these endgames. It is now a rook and 3 pawns versus 2 knights. You're not going to save this. It's going to take a while for me to kind of, he repeats a couple times without making a draw. He has to coordinate, and the thing is the knights are too slow. They're just too slow. They can jump around the board, and they can stand next to each other and look very nice, but they're just too slow. And look at Mamidyarov very confidently and slowly moving his pieces in the right way, puts the pawn all the way to h7, and now the king is going for the a pawn. You can rest assured, once that pawn falls, black's position falls, not to mention how depressing it is to have your rook completely cut off from the rest of the board, right? And on move 63 in this game, he resigned, Keimer resigned, as Mamidyarov made the final thrust into position with the move a5. In Group B, after 4 games of action, it is very close, but Mamidyarov with 2.5 and Dominguez Perez with 2.5, only trailed by Dubov. No, I apologize. Trailed by Keimer with 2. Dubov struggling in that section with 1 out of 4. So Here we go, folks. It's on to Group C. In Group C, the first game that I would like to show you is between Wesley So and Sam Shankland. This one was gonna be a King's Indian or a Grunfeld. It became a completely symmetrical position. So, well, I apologize, borderline symmetrical if white had castled. But Wesley puts a knight into the middle of the board and tries to argue like, okay, well, our pawn structure is symmetrical, but I'm gonna try to put some pressure on you before you're able to finish your development. And yeah, I mean, it's very common in these positions for things to look like this. Almost completely identical. The only difference, of course, if white goes knight f3 and was castled. So, white here does apply a little bit of pressure just because in any symmetrical position, white is putting some pressure to black because white moves first. He takes on b6, he plays e3, but Shankland just very I mean, rook a5 is just such a savage move. Look at this, defending the middle, defending knight infiltration to a4, b5, and h4 is played to stop g5, e6, but again, things are just too solid. Shankland at a right moment sacrifices a g-pawn here, takes. If you take on g5, then there's this knight d7, this pawn is a goner, so knight c6, and as you might imagine, what happens when games are liquidated, pieces begin flying off, we have a trade, Shankland goes back to d7, a trade of bishops, a trade of pawns, and the players agree to a draw after 30 moves when they are going to go into a rook n3 versus rook n3 endgame. It happens. But there was another game in Group C, and this was a game between Maxim Vachilagrov, who lost with black to Predke. So he's like, all right, Predke, you think you're good? Let's go. It's no surprise that he took a sip of Evian water. Here we have a Ruy Lopez. We have a6, knight f6. So not a Berlin defense. We have rook e1, b5, bishop b3, d6, ultra mainline stuff. I mean, this is like incredibly mainline. Now we have rook e8. So rook e8 is the Zaitsev system. Here black can play a lot of stuff like knight a5, knight b8, which is the Breyer. Those are generally the two moves. But rook e8, bishop f8, etc. It's the Zaitsev. So we have bishop b7, a3, h6, and he actually plays the Zaitsev in a way that I've never seen played. I only know bishop f8, but here he plays queen d7, knight back to a7, and bishop knight back to c8, and bishop d8. Maybe I should study my historical Ruy Lopez games more. I've never seen this ever in my life. I don't know what the heck he's trying to do back there. I mean, it's like Noah's Ark. It's like Predke's Ark. He's just putting all the pieces on the 8th rank, but in different orders, right? I mean, I don't know. I've just never seen this before. So now the knight goes to e7. He seems to think this is the way to do it, but a couple moves later, the bishop goes back to c8. I mean, can someone please tell me what's going on? Honestly, I don't understand chess. I'd love to explain this to all of you. I don't get it. It seems like white should convincingly be better in these close positions, but it's not the case. Believe it or not, that after like something like queen b7, this seems to be the right coordination. Maybe black wants to play like this. Maybe black wants the bishops to stare this way. Maybe black wants to move the knight over to g6. I don't know. But apparently black is completely fine. Knight g6 is completely fine. But MVL's like, I gotta play for a win. So here's f4. Knight g6 is great. Takes. King is safe. Bishop back to b1. Bishop b6. Let's trade bishops. Okay. Let's trade, and let me plant my rook in the middle of the board. I mean, visually speaking, it is insane that the black position is still standing. Like, here, I want to play knight e2, knight d4, and then put my knight on c6, kick your rook out, take this pawn, and just win the game on the spot. How does anything in black's position make sense? How is black going to prevent all of white's activity? If this pawn moves up and this bishop activates, the game is done, right? Bishop d7, knight d4, and Predke's like, nope, g5. The pawn that is supposed to be safeguarding my king is now going to be a weapon. MVL's like, are you sure? Yeah, g4 apparently. What? h4, and my man Predke plays g3 check. If you take this with the queen or the king, then I got knight g4 coming. Predke is using that pawn as a weapon. He's not using it as a defense. g3, and my man MVL takes with the king. This absolute savage takes with the king. If you play knight g4 now, I'm going to move this queen into f7. I don't care about going back home. My king stands here. He's lifting weights out in the open. Come and get me. Come and get me. Rook f8, knight f3, and a couple moves later, what's MVL going to do? He's going to take the rook that's being offered, check and move back. Wait, what? Whoa. Whoa. This rook has been hanging for a million turns. It's been hanging because knight h5 check will win the queen, right? It'll just win a full queen. So MVL, instead of safeguarding his queen and not letting it get taken, sacrifices his queen. He sacks the queen. Apparently here, if Predka had moved his rook over to b2 and kept an eye on everything with that rook and g2 and this king over here, he would have been, I apologize. I apologize. Rook b2 is what he played in the game. Had he not done this, which looks very natural, and taken the rook instead, and rook f1, computer claims that maybe black is doing something here, but this looks impossible to play because white is going to go here, and I told you a long time ago, if this bishop is activated, the game is probably over. Okay, so you got to be really careful. Instead of doing that, he plays rook b2, MVL transfer the knight to e6, and rook f8 is coming, among other things. So Prekta sacks the rook for the bishop. He's like, no, I don't want that bishop on the board anymore. But that's the wrong decision. And I fear he was in time trouble because he played this on move 39, the 39th of 40 moves. That is when you are a move away from getting that bonus time. He might have been in time trouble and decided desperate times call for desperate measures. MVL's king is a Chad. All right, if you're unfamiliar with what a Chad is, you might have to look that up on the internet. But this king is a gangster. I mean, coming out here, protecting against the enemy queen invading, rook c1, rook c8, rook f8. I mean, very, very nasty stuff here. And MVL gets the win. An incredibly tense game where the black queen was thwarted at all infiltration spots. The rooks were coming in. MVL's king was super brave. And when push came to shove and the tactics started flying, MVL was just a bit sharper. The leader of Group C after 4 rounds is everybody. Everybody in Group C has 2 points out of 4. Yeah. So I don't know what's going to happen in Group C. We move to Group D, where things before this round were Vitugov was our leader, right? Vitugov was the leader with 2 points out of 3. Anish Giri and Yu Yangi playing a Grunfeld, a Russian system with Queen B3. Sorry, a FIDE system. We're not allowed to acknowledge Russian flag. I'm just kidding. I'm not just kidding. The players are playing under the FIDE flag, but I think you can still call this the Russian system. Although I don't know, let's call it the FIDE system. Takes, e4, and in this system of the Grunfeld, white seems to have an absolutely dominant center like d4, e4, but black is very quick with counterplay as well, as you are about to see. Knight goes back to b6, and again, it looks like white is dominant, but black has enough counterplay. c5 will happen, knight c6 will happen, knight a5 will happen. Very complex Grunfeld fight. Look at the black knights dancing on the edge of the board, transferring into c4, pushing the white pieces back, and f6. And this is crazy, the fact that these pieces can actually deal with this. Like, this looks absurd. It looks like white just has everything here, but black is very resourceful. I mean, this is very Grunfeld style. You know, pressuring the center with this kind of a bit of an ugly formation. Here, for the life of me, I don't understand why Yu Yangi didn't kick this knight out. I don't know why he wouldn't just play b3 before moving on with his life. He chose to play f4 and hold his center together, but now Anish Giri threw a kick with c5, and I mean, everything is attacked. Everything is attacked. The position's about to be in ruins. dc5, look at this, queen c5. What? Sacking the queen to win the queen. g4 to kick the bishop out, takes the knight, because you can't obviously go back. Takes queen c6, bishop f3. I'm threatening to win your queen. I'm threatening knight f6 check. And then you take it and I take your queen. So knight takes e5. Right? The queen is now protected. You play queen b3 check. The knight goes back. This knight goes in. What the heck? You can't take, the queen is hanging. You can't take, the queen is hanging. You can't take, the queen is hanging. But the queen can go here. I take this, you take my knight instead. Now you are attacking my king. Yu Yangi really not comfortable here. f5. Let me get another bishop involved in the game. Check. King f1. And king f8 to sidestep the queen pin. King g2. The king's running. The same kind of king. Look at this. The king safe on g3, just like in the game between MVL and Predka. King is safe. White is winning. White has just got to get the rook in the game. But we're in the low time, right? So knight c4, queen d3, a4 here is another option to just chop away at the b pawn and get the rook into a1. We have bishop takes b2, queen d5. Yu Yangi is trying to trade the queens into an endgame where he would be better because he has the rook, but he should have activated the rook. For a second move in a row, he had an opportunity to find a way to activate his rook. Rook d1 is better because now here comes the black queen. And when you do it this way, bishop c3, and the bishop is coming to e1. See, if you had done this faster, the queen would have been covering e3. But he misses this idea by black, I guess, to play bishop e1, and now he has to force a draw. He has nothing. One move short. Had he done queen d3 and rook d1, black would have had nothing here. I mean, he wouldn't have been able to play like this. If b4 to try to play bishop c3, I kick out your knight, right? I kick out the knight. So he had to activate the rook a little bit faster. And because there's bishop e1, check, and he has to force the draw. I imagine he was also in low time because he would have probably seen it. I can check how much time he had at the end of the game. He had 1 minute. So, yeah. And I can't include timers, by the way, because that would force a complete recropping of everything, and maybe in the future, but for now, no. And the final game of the day in Group D, Amin Tabatabai versus Nikita Vityugov. Nikita is the leader of Group D, and he plays a Slav defense versus Tabatabai, bishop f5. This is known as the slow Slav, but it's not so slow because you play moves like knight h4 and looking for the light squared bishop. You get the queen out to b3. These positions are extremely complicated. Where white castles long, black oftentimes doesn't even castle. Black will just keep the king in the middle of the board. Black can't take on h2 because the queen has to stay protecting this. And black counterattacks white with moves like a5, a4, etc. Very complex position. In fact, I think I have this exact position in my notes. 14 moves of prep that Tabatabai played. Maybe this position is in my notes, and but yeah, I've prepared these lines with white. So Tabatabai causes a complete mess. I mean, he brings his knight back to f2. If you're wondering why this is not getting captured, it's because after e4, black is in real trouble. This queen is kind of stranded away from the rest of the pieces. White can advance in the middle and then crack it open. So that is why it's not happening. Knight d7, e4. However, here's the problem. Oftentimes with black, you have to be brave because if you don't take that pawn, then after white plays the move h4, offering it up to you once again, by the way, I don't know if you're noticing, offering up the h-file again to you, if you don't open the h-file fast enough and you just play on the queen side, then sometimes what happens is that your position is just worse. If you don't take the bait, then what simply happens is white has more space in the center, white has the bishop pair, and white has things that they can target because your knights just can't really get into the game. And because Vityugov refused the poisonous pawn on the h-file, Tabatabai now has a free hand. He can very slowly, you see, look what he's doing. He's rounding up the weakness, right? And he just takes it. He takes it, giving away 2 pieces for the rook. But as we just saw Mamedyarov's game, a rook versus 2 knights is almost better all the time because the knights are so slow. The rook now gets to hang out on that 7th rank. 2 pawns, same situation, rook and 2 pawns versus 2 knights. Not very effective, and that's it. Look at all this pressure on that knight on d7, rook a7, bishop takes d7, and Tabatabai just very confidently trades down. King will walk up with these queenside pawns, and yeah, folks, I think you see where this is going. The pawns just go. The king and the pawns just go. I mean, they literally just go. And Vityugov resigns because he can't stop them. Tabatabai wins. A shocking defeat by, again, a group where the lowest rated player has beaten the group leader. I mean, that's not exactly what happened in Group A, but Tabatabai shakes everything up. Group D is also all tied. Aparin leads Group A. What? And Group C and D have 4 people in them who all have the same amount of points with 2 rounds to go. This is nuts. We have to break this tie somehow. And we will in the next 2 rounds. I'll see you then. Get out of here.